Welcome back. We're going to dive into a chapter on transitioning to leadership. Transitioning to leadership is something that you really don't hear very many people talk about when you talk about leadership. And it's still a really difficult shift for many people for a lot of reasons. People who used to be your peers, you're now their manager. So you got that relationship dynamic. It's really about how do we help you adapt to your new role? And how do you be confident in that role as you work with people who maybe used to be your peers? So this is a real opportunity for us to really dive in and learn some here. And we're going to go through some strategies that you can utilize if you're in that position of transitioning to leadership. So the topics that we're going to cover is that transition from individual contributor to leader. And then we're also going to cover how do you build leadership presence, right? How do you establish credibility and authority with the people on your team? There's this extra challenge of the dynamic again of potentially these people used to be your peers. So how do you get them to do the work that you want them to do? How do you get them to essentially treat you like a leader or respect you as a leader, right? So we're going to go through all of that in this chapter. So when you think about transitioning from an individual contributor to a leader, it really requires a shift in your thinking, your focus. So a lot of people who are great individual contributors get promoted to leaders, but being a great individual contributor does not mean that you'll be a great leader, right? It's not an automatic thing. They require two very different skill sets. So you have to really think about it now from a leadership perspective, and how do you focus on your task as a leader and how you get your team to actually do the work that needs to be done. It's not your job to do the work anymore. Your job is to support your team in getting the work done. So embrace your new role. Understand what the responsibilities are of your role as a leader in your organization and what the expectations are from your boss. What is it that they really expect you to do? Then it's about making sure that you really open communication with your team. So encourage dialogue, essentially, and address any concerns that they might have. But you also need to establish some boundaries, right? Again, these are people who used to work with you as peers. And overnight, even though that relationship dynamic has changed, some of the behaviors might not change. So it's really up to you to say, hey, I love that we're friends, but let's establish some boundaries, some clear boundaries around work, right? Here's what we can and can't do. Here's what's allowed and not allowed. That way, you don't end up in an uncomfortable situation with someone that you consider to be a friend. And then it's about building trust. So a lot of times as you move to a leader, you'll notice that people start to engage with you in a different way. So it's about you essentially building trust as a leader. Even though you already have a relationship with these folks, they don't know you as a leader. Right? So, you have to establish yourself as a leader, and you have to build that trust as a leader. So be fair to everyone, treat everybody with respect, right? You get what you give, and be consistent in your actions. Treat everybody the same. And again, I know it might be uncomfortable, particularly with someone who you consider a friend, but it's important that you really show fairness to everyone, and that will help everybody to respect you as a leader. And then establish clear expectations for the whole team. This is how we're going to work together. Give everybody an opportunity to not only voice their concerns, but to make suggestions on how you all work together as a team. Now that a new leader is in place, people may have some things that they'd either like to get off their chest or that they'd like to share in how they think you can optimize how you work together. So in terms of your relationship with your former peers, be super transparent with them, right? Talk about, hey, I know I'm in this new role and I know things are going to be a little different because I'm in this different role. Hey, I still would like for us to be friends, but because I am your supervisor, we have to have some clear boundaries around what's allowed and what's not allowed. Get feedback from them. Get their input. What's their perspective? think about it. This might be somebody else who also wanted the role that you got. So how to get that feedback from them so there's no animosity and that you don't have somebody who essentially is purposely or maybe subconsciously even sabotaging work in some ways, right? Because they're upset and they have some animosity because they didn't get the role. And they also might feel like, hey, now you think you're better than I am because you got the role. So you really have to get their feedback so that you can address the concerns that they have. Make sure you provide opportunities for everybody to collaborate, foster collaboration and communication. And again, establish those boundaries. I said it before, but it's worth saying again. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes that new leaders make. They don't establish boundaries with the people that used to be their peers. So you have all of these awkward conversations. Essentially, people, oh, that's just so-and-so. They don't do the work the way that they should, which ultimately can reflect on you and them. So start off on the right foot and establish your boundaries. So how do you foster open communication, right? Let's talk about that a bit. You really should go to people and actually just say, hey, let's have an Ask Me Anything session, right? As a leader, I'm being vulnerable, right? I'm opening the doors and saying, ask me anything that you want, and I'm going to provide you with an honest answer to the best of my ability. I say the best of my ability because sometimes there are things that you can't talk about as a leader, right? So you have to be able to say, hey, I appreciate the question, but that's not something that I can talk about right now. When the time is right, then I can give you more information about that. Have Ask Me Anywhere sessions with the team. And when people see that you're really being open and honest, that will make people more comfortable with you as a leader. And in your one-on-ones with folks, have those one-on-ones and really talk to them about their needs and really let everybody feel like they have the opportunity to speak. Because sometimes people won't speak in group meetings, but they'll come to you in a one-on-one situation and talk to you. You also could create a virtual suggestion box where people could drop their comments, questions, concerns, suggestions. But it's important that you go through those and say, hey, here's what we got, here's what we can act on, and here's what we can't. All of those things will foster open communication, and over time you'll see people will be much more open and they'll trust you that they can have a conversation with you and that you will follow up and follow through on what you say. So a former peer that you consider to be a friend that you now lead, right? You're their manager now. They tell an inappropriate joke that makes another coworker uncomfortable. So how do you, as the new leader, handle that situation? Now, that's a tough one. So what I want you to think about is you have to be able to pull that person aside and say, hey, that was an inappropriate joke. That made the other person uncomfortable. Please don't do that again. Or you have to have the conversation with them around, hey, remember that we've got these boundaries. It might have been okay for us to have jokes like that, between ourselves, right? But we can't do that in the broader group. It just will make some people uncomfortable. You also have to think about, is it something that you actually need to take to HR, to your people operations? Because depending upon what was said, it could be something, could be considered sexual harassment as an example, right? So your thought process has to shift, right? And you need to be able to say to that person, hey, that was inappropriate. It's something that we're going to have to go have a conversation with HR about. Or if you're unsure, don't say that. Go to people ops and actually ask them and say, hey, here's what happened. Get a recommendation from them on how they think you should handle that situation, because every company has different policies. So how do you build trust as a leader with your former peers? So we talked about building trust a little bit already, right? So it's really about doing what you say you're going to do. It's about communicating openly with the team, right? It's about supporting them, right? So those are the things that you can do that will help them to trust you, particularly as it involves other teams or people bringing work to the table. You don't want to be a manager that basically is like a river runs through it, right? So essentially what I mean by that is your boss or your peers or somebody gives you work and you just filter it straight through without any lens on who's got too much work to do, without any lens on is it something that your team should do. All right. So your job is not to just basically you'll be a proxy, right? Your job is to actually think about your team, about your resources, and to say, hey, we can't handle this extra work right now, or we have to prioritize, right? You have to be able to think about what's best for the team. You don't want to burn people out. And you also don't want them to become resentful. So the next piece is on building a leadership presence, credibility, and authority. We're going to pause the video right here, and we'll pick up on this in the next lesson. I'll see you there.